Welcome back to the Inside Running Podcast. This is the weekend interview. This week, it is a throwback to Feb 2020, right before COVID went all over the world and shut everything down. We got Tom Schwartz, Tin Man. Crokes did this one. One of the, probably one of the most well-known coaches in the world, especially in the US. Some really, really good tips about training and how hard you should do your easy runs and how many reps you should do in workouts and the kind of feelings you should feel during the sessions you're doing to continue to keep your ball rolling and be injury-free. So I really hope you enjoy this one. I listened to it today and like 5 minutes to 10 minutes in, he starts going real deep, like scientific words that I have no idea what they mean. But just hang tough for those 5 minutes there. Crokes gets it back on the rails. And the minute you hear him start talking about Wardlaw and Chloe Hesse, things like that, you'll know, no, it's all good from there and not so technical. He also talks about, this is the guy who was the head coach of Tin Man Elite, and obviously his nickname is Tin Man, and people who have followed that team over the last couple of years will know that he is no longer the head coach of Tin Man Elite, so that's some important context there. But the group is still called Tin Man Elite without him on there. Obviously, there's two sides to every story, and I got a bit it was a bit kind of sad listening to it today, hearing his passion for that team, knowing that he's no longer involved in that team. But yeah, you can probably just type that into Google if you want to do any more research there. I think next week we're going to have a new guest interview, not a re-release. But yeah, we'll be working on that for next weekend. Enjoy this chat with Crokes and Tom Schwartz, going back to episode 119, which was Feb 2020. Cheers, guys.
This week's guest is a highly respected coach with close to 30 years of experience. He also happens to be head coach of the Tinman Elite Pro Squad, which is based in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome to the Inside Running Podcast, Tom Schwartz.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you so much for giving up some of your time. I'm really looking forward to picking your brains for the next hour or so and also finding out more about Tinman Elite because you guys are not only getting great results on the track, but you're also doing an excellent job of promoting the sport. I guess a lot of our listeners in Australia won't know much about you, so it's probably a good place to start with maybe giving an introduction to how you got into the sport and your background in coaching.
I was an all-around athlete growing up. I played a lot of ball sports. I learned a lot of my skills and understanding of what it takes to be an athlete from those ball sports, actually. And then I happened on to athletics or track and field around age 13. And I found I was pretty darn good at it. I was great at ball sports, had no idea that I would be pretty good at running, and became successful. And it was for the first time that I felt a sense of pride about my performance because it was just me running the race, nobody else. I didn't have to pass the ball or rely on somebody else. And I certainly didn't have to rely on an official making a proper call, a good judgment. And that in itself made me excited about the sport because it was just me just performing at my best, and the satisfaction from the effort was enormous. So I became more and more interested in running because of that over the following years, and then competed in track and field and cross country in high school and other ball sports. Went down to the university level and competed in both track and field and cross country, and started really getting an interest in coaching when I ran into a myriad of injuries. And I had pretty bad injuries that resulted in surgery when I was around 19 years old. I had compartment syndrome very badly in my lower legs. It's an excessive swelling, and you can't get rid of it, and it presses on the nerves. It makes you feel like you're getting your blood pressure taken constantly. And so what happened was, as a consequence of my inability to run well because of this compartment syndrome, I couldn't train at a high volume that was needed to be successful. I started becoming more and more interested in coaching, understanding the physiology behind performance, so that I could help others. And what I found was right away that convention wasn't answering a lot of my questions. Convention meaning what people were doing for training had always been based on what previous people did for training.
Yep.
And I found it lacking from a science point of view. I always loved science. I always loved math. I was good at them. And I saw the disconnect between what people were doing in the field in practice versus what science was saying. And for example, science was saying, look, you can have a multitude of training effects if you understand how intensity and volume interact. Mm-hmm. You just don't have to go out there and run as many miles or kilometers as you possibly can tolerate to get the huge aerobic benefit. You can actually run an intermediate amount of miles or kilometers and intermix a variety of medium to somewhat high intensity and get the same effect. But you would get a lot more skill development by using the higher quality in your training mix instead of relying on huge volume where you can't really improve your skills. In fact, I would argue you erode skills. Yeah. Because you're doing so much volume and you're certainly not able to do a large volume of high intensity. So you're doing a large volume of low to moderate intensity, which may be good as a foundational tool, but it's awful for skill development. And it certainly doesn't help you improve sustainable power. Yeah. What you have is great endurance.
And so what, before you got injured and stopped running, what sort of times did you get down to as an athlete?
I actually got my best times. I achieved my best times in my late 20s when I was in the United States Air Force. I was down to around 4:01 and 15:13 in the 1500 and 5K. I was running only 8 kilometers a day. I was working 60, 65 hours a week as an X-ray tech in the U.S. Air Force and on call all the time and on my feet 10, 12 hours a day. I was exhausted. And one would think, based on that slower times would be the result, but it wasn't the case for me. Largely because I was just using science to help myself train. And I dialed back all the hard quality that I used to do at the university level, and instead focused on more in critical velocity, some threshold. And I was very into trying to figure out how things like heart rate and my breathing and my cadence and all that were affected by fatigue from my work life. And so I made a large gain, or a leap, I should say, in my understanding of how everything interacts because of the extreme fatigue I was going through from my work life. So I did drop in performances, yet I always wonder what I could have done if I had been able to double the amount of training, because running 35 minutes a day average is inadequate for if I wanted to run a good 5K, but running 15, 13 on 35 minutes per day of running gave me insight that, hey, a lot is possible even on low volume. And if I run perhaps, an hour per day, which is what I recommend as a minimum for somebody who wants to be serious, maybe I could have run in the 14s or something like that. I don't know.
Well, you sort of touched on your training philosophy a little bit in the first sort of part of this interview, but if anybody Googles you, I'd imagine it would come up with Tinman Elite, but the thing that you're really well known for is this term called critical velocity and running at critical velocity during training sessions. So would you like to explain what critical velocity is, what sort of intensity it works out to be, and how much of that training you would do in a session or a workout?
Okay, sure. Well, critical velocity is a term I came up with in 1989 when I started graduate school. And I was taking an advanced statistics course, and they were talking about critical values as to whether something was significant or not from a statistical point of view. And it just so happened at that time I had been searching for a term to describe the intensity that I figured out was optimal for developing the aerobic ability of the fast intermediate muscle fibers. At the time, nobody called it fast intermediate muscle fibers. I started calling it that, and then in particular in the early 2000s when I joined Let'sRun.com, I called it that, and it seemed like the term stuck with a lot of people. And next thing I know, I see it in the research literature. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I didn't know the people on Let's Run were actually into, research. Maybe people with PhDs or something like that were reading it. But anyway, long story short is I had derived mathematically and anecdotally the concept that intensity approaching 90% of maximum aerobic capacity, or VO2 max or VO2 peak, which is the newer term that scientists now use because it's more precise, was optimal for developing the aerobic capacity of the fast intermediate muscle fibers. And for edification, approximately 35% of the entire muscle population in your legs, which are used for running, are fast intermediate muscle fibers for the typical runner. For the long distance specialist, it might be a slightly smaller fraction. And for the 800 meter, 1500 meter runner, it might be an even higher fraction. But you can figure somewhere between 25 and 45% of the available muscle fiber population that you can stimulate during running is actually that particular population that is by nature, without training, that is, untrained, it is more anaerobically or from a biochemical standpoint oriented. I always say that the fast intermediate muscle fibers were what we used on the savannah in Africa a few thousand years ago when we wanted to run away from the lion that we saw 400 meters away from us. And if we turned and ran flat out for about 45 seconds or so, we would escape the lion, because the lion, although faster, can only run about 25 seconds before it's completely depleted, because it's nearly 100% fast explosive muscle fibers. So it won't catch us. So by nature, that particular muscle fiber, in my estimation, or at least in my theory, is oriented towards anaerobic glycolysis, or non-oxidative phosphorylation, and breaking down the stored fuel source, glycogen. But the beauty is we're adaptable. Our muscle fiber, that particular muscle fiber, is highly adaptable, and with the right stimulus can move away from the anaerobic glycolysis metabolic profile to the aerobic, breakdown, the oxidative phosphorylation of the glycogen or glucose that we have available. And so over time, you can make that fast intermediate muscle fiber incredibly good at consuming available oxygen.
Yep.
Rather than relying on this immediate burst of energy, which has a deleterious effect of extreme muscle fatigue. Yeah. For a variety of reasons. There's metabolic ketosis and inorganic phosphate issues and sarcoplasmic reticulum issues, the sarcolemma. There's a whole bunch of things that go on there in terms of generating muscle fatigue. But needless to setting that aside, we can make those fast intermediate muscle fibers aerobic monsters, so to speak. And the ability to, the thing that's important to understand, and which most people don't get, is that that you can't change the size of the neuron that supplies the electrical current to the muscle fibers. And remember, really what we should talk about is motor units, because each neuron that comes in from our nervous system, we have a signal that comes from our brain through our spinal cord and then to our peripheral nerves. And there's at the end of it, you have a neuron. It kind of looks like a bulb that, you plant down in the ground for a flower. And the electrical current that, and acetylcholine and all that comes zipping down from the spinal cord and into that neuron and activates, all or none, activates all of the associated muscle fibers that are connected with it. And you could have as many as 900 muscle fibers for each one of those neurons, for example, in your vastus lateralis out in the side of your thigh. And what happens is that what happens from a macro perspective is it doesn't change. The size of it doesn't change, and how many muscle fibers are connected to it doesn't change. However, we can change the biochemical composition of that muscle fiber via the stimuli that we expose it to. So if we expose it to high explosive 200 and 300 and 400 meter runs, what we're doing is saying anaerobic glycolysis, non-oxidative phosphorylation is really a big deal. Let's make that our priority. But if on the other hand, we dial back the intensity a bit and we give it sustained 3 and 4 and 5 minute runs at a medium high intensity, what we do is make it a priority within that muscle fiber to use oxygen.
Yeah.
The muscle fiber, but the neuron is still the same. So you can change the muscle. So you still have the fast current coming in for the fast intermediate muscle fibers, but now you've changed it into ability to use the oxygen.
Yeah. And so,
does that make sense?
Yeah. And so from what I understand, critical velocity is roughly the pace that you could maintain for 30 minutes, like roughly. Yeah.
Roughly. It can vary. It can be anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes. But as a general rule, if you drew a bell curve, the vast majority of people are between 28 and 35 minutes.
Yeah.
Who are distance runners, not your sedentary population who has nearly no endurance capacity at all. That might be significantly less.
Yeah. And you mentioned before running reps of say 2 to 5 minutes. Is that generally the range that the reps would be?
The vast majority of the time, I prescribe 3 to 4 minute reps.
Yeah. Off what sort of recovery?
Usually about a third.
Yeah. Okay. And how many? And what duration of? Yeah. How long would that? Or how many reps would you do of that?
It depends upon your fitness level and what you've done prior to it. So, in the case where you haven't been doing any of the reps, you're going to start with something as little as 12 to 15 minutes. So if you did 3 minute reps, you're doing 4 or 5 with a 3 or 4 times 3 minutes at CV with a minute jog. That would be a typical type of a session if you're beginning. If you're of low fitness level, that same concept applies to you.
Yeah.
A world-class runner can go out and do 10 times 3 minutes on 1 minute off, and that's a totally appropriate runner for somebody who say runs 27 minutes in the 10K.
Yeah.
Right? That's a solid stimulus. It doesn't wipe them out, but it gets all the benefits that they need. Could they do more? Yes. Do they need to do more? Probably not. Why? Because they have first of all, it provided sufficient stimulus to get the effect. B, they have a lot of other types of training that they need to do within their cycles, whether it's a weekly, bi-weekly, tri-weekly. Their cycles, they have a lot of other types of training they need to do. So you can't overextend it. That's the big mistake people make. They put all their eggs in one basket. They go out there and they crush a workout and they try to prove something to themselves.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was doing a bit of research for the interview, and one of the comments from your coaches said, and it's from Sam, you don't get any real oh shit, I'm in shape workout. So sort of what you're saying is that the sessions or the workouts are comfortably hard without really getting close to what you could do in a race. Is that a fair assessment?
There's no need. Yeah, well, there's just no need for pure exhaustion.
Yeah.
You don't prove any stuff. So I've always said, look, somewhere around 80% of what you can do is plenty sufficient to get all the benefits without all the deleterious effects of creating chronic fatigue, injury, and so on that would affect all subsequent training.
Yeah.
You have a great example of a coach in your country who has followed this for 50 plus years, Pat Clohessy.
Yeah. Yep. Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
He was brilliant at understanding that everything is a puzzle. You got to fit it together. There's no need to crush yourselves, and you crush yourselves in any one workout. Dial it back so you get a good workout, a solid workout, but not an absolute maximum exhaustion workout. Try to be able to cover all your bases.
Yeah.
That's the brilliance of Pat Clohessy and people like Wardlaw and others that came along afterward, that followed his lead.
Yeah, I think Chloe's coaching philosophy came about because as an athlete himself, I think he flogged himself and he realised that wasn't the way to go. So he sort of realised that, finishing sessions with a little bit more to give is the way to go. Just a quick question on the, let's say you're like, in the past, for example, I've been in, say, 30-minute, 10-kilometre shape. But then in training, if I was to go and do 1 kilometre reps in 3 minutes, in training, I wouldn't actually feel like I could maintain that for 30 minutes in training. So with this whole, a pace that you could hold for 30 minutes, is that perceived effort? So, for example, if I'm in 30-minute shape on a training day, I reckon I would be able to hold maybe 3 10s for 30 minutes. So should I be running my reps closer to 3 10s or 3 minutes?
Oh, absolutely, according to what you can do that day. I've argued forever that goal-paced training has more drawbacks than benefits.
Yeah.
And you're only as good as you're capable of that day. So it's not true that you have to run at goal pace in order to get fitter and be able to hit a faster race, a better race time in the future. What you got to do is constantly train under control and train at the level that you're at that day. So indeed, if you have difficulty running on a training day, the same that you would on a race day, you should be just saying to yourself, what can I run today? Well, 31 minutes. Yeah. I can run a 10K today in training shoes. I'm tired. I got higher volume. I can run in about 31 minutes. Okay. Well, what is that pace?
Yeah.
That's far more realistic.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe now, would you be able to give us a bit of an idea? I know every athlete within your elite squad's slightly different, but how would a general week look for your athletes in terms of how many workouts, what makes up those workouts, fast long runs, slow long runs, just a general Monday to Sunday type of week?
Well, that's a great question. Starting in 1989, I absolutely argued with anybody that wanted to have a logical discussion that it is wrong to think that you need 3+ hard workouts a week. It's absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely wrong. What happens is you can get away with it in the short term because the large percentage of the gains is neurologic. You're gaining power and coordination because your nervous system is adapting to a high intensity exposure. Yeah. Right? So doing 3 times a workout, doing a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday high intensity interval session will provide you with short-term benefits because the nervous system's adapting very quickly to the new high intensity exposure. But it's not something you can sustain over the long term typically, unless you're a genetic freak and have a very fast adaptability. Then you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Is it still the optimal? No, I argue no. No, it's not.
So what? So what days do your guys normally do workouts?
Typically a Tuesday and a Friday, and then they do a long run Sunday.
Yeah, okay. And so one of those sessions every week would be a critical velocity for 20 to 30 minutes, followed by often some shorter reps. Is that right? True. Because in my view, you can integrate training intensities into single workouts and derive multifactorial benefits. It is absolutely, in my opinion, ludicrous thinking that you have to isolate training and only do one type of training at a time. Yeah.
The human body is maybe the human mind thinks that we have to isolate, but the human body doesn't work that way.
Yeah, very true.
Right? You can do longer reps at a slower speed, go to medium reps, duration reps at a higher speed, and finish with really short reps at a very fast speed. And derive benefits from all of it within one workout. You don't have to do, say, a VO2 max workout and all you do are 800-meter repeats at your 3K speed on one day, and then another day do repeat 200s at a very fast speed or whatever, or do a tempo run at threshold for 45. That's a bunch of baloney.
Yeah. So
absolute bunch of baloney.
So if you have one of those CV sessions a week with some, 30-second hills or 30-second quicker, so you might do 6 by 3 minutes off 1 minute recovery and six 30-second hills or 6 30-second short bursts off a minute. So that would be one session a week. What would the other session be? Would it be the same type of thing or would it be something different?
Usually something different. It might be longer reps at slightly slower speeds, or if I'm training somebody to run the 1,500 meters and they have a key race in 3 or 4 weeks, we might start out with something like threshold for the warm-up for 3 miles, roughly 15 minutes for my elite guys, and then they might do some short quality, like some race pace work. But if they're a long distance specialist, it might be tailored to a different direction. They might be doing things like repeat miles at their half marathon pace or threshold pace or something like that. Depends a lot on how far away from your peak race you are. It depends upon the duration of your race, not the distance. And that's the mistake people make all the time.
Yeah.
They always talk about the distance of the race. No, don't do that. Talk about the duration. How many minutes and seconds will it take to recover? An elite half marathoner, it takes them around an hour to run the distance of the race. But an average Jane or Joe might take 90 minutes, 50% longer. So if you're training to run 90 minutes, you don't need nearly as much anaerobic, right, type of training as somebody who runs just an hour. You need a lot more long endurance type, slower tempo stuff if you're running a race that takes 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And I get tired of people labeling me as, he prescribes tempos. I'm not. No, it just depends. It depends how long it takes you to cover the distance and your background. A novice runner benefits greatly, in my view. It's a model difference that I have. My conceptual model is if you're a long distance runner and if you're not as fit, you benefit more from the tempo type work, particularly if you're not well developed in the endurance sector. That domain in particular, requires immense amount of work over a long period of time to get your endurance to a high level. If you're unfit and trying to run a faster 10K, well, tempo type work at marathon pace or something actually benefits you greatly, because your physiology is not to the point where you have great endurance. You don't have a lot of mitochondria. You don't have a lot of capillaries. You don't have a lot of stuff that provides you with the ability to sustain a medium high intensity for that 10K. And your 10K time is like 50 or 60 minutes. You're not the same. You're not in the same world as somebody who runs a 27 or 28 minute 10K.
Yeah. And thoughts on hard long runs? You a fan of them, or more of the slow time on your feet?
As a general rule, no. And I don't think you have to be slow, but you don't need to hammer them. The vast majority, it just depends again a little bit on, are you training for the marathon, or are you training for the 10K or 5K or whatever? Certainly the shorter the event, the less less important the long run is in terms of pace. Just cover the distance at a comfortable pace if you're a track guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which one of my questions here was the difference in training between your 5K guys and your marathoner. So obviously this critical velocity training applies to all distances, but what would be the major differences outside of, obviously the marathon is going to have a longer long run? Is there any other differences that you have between your marathon runners and your 5K guys?
Well, I can't say, well, let me think about this for a second. During the weeks leading up to the marathon, I move more and more towards marathon type workouts, and I integrate that within the long run.
Okay, yep. So you make
far away from the goal event, I train them like a 10K person.
Yep.
5K, 10, 3K, 5K, 10K type person. A marathon will be trained by me, say 16, 18, 20 weeks out. There's no need to be doing really long runs with a lot of marathon type training in them 16 plus weeks out.
Yeah. So you'll make Sunday, closer to the marathon, Sunday will be essentially a workout day.
Workout day within the long run. That's the thing I developed in 1989 as out of necessity. I had my very first long distance runners, marathoners were in 1989, were people that had very busy schedules. One, she was working on her teaching certification through the university, and she was up very late at night, writing her lesson plans, and then up very early to get to the school and teach all day. And it was very difficult for her to stick to a schedule such as Tuesday workout, Friday workout, Sunday long run. Very difficult because she had a lot of ever-changing demands from the university and her mentor teacher and so on and so forth. And she had to attend meetings. So what I did was I created a flexible marathon training schedule for her. And I said, look, somewhere around Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, in the middle of the week, I want you to do a medium long run, whichever day works better for you, Carrie. Her name is Carrie. And in that run, I want you to do XYZ. I want you to do some 8 times 3 minutes at CV, or I want you to do 6 times a mile at your threshold, or whatever. I would tell her. And then I said, somewhere on the weekend, Carrie, when it works out for you, doesn't have to be Sunday, doesn't have to be Saturday, could even be Friday if you happen to have a day off for whatever reason, the school wasn't in session. But on the weekend, you need to do a medium long run, and then I would prescribe something within that medium long, or a longer run within, and some quality within that session that was very specific.
Yeah.
And I said, Carrie, the rest of the week, look, I know your schedule's crazy, and I know you're fatigued, and I know it's unrealistic for me to assign a certain mileage or a certain amount of training for you to do on an everyday basis. You simply have to be flexible. I said, look, 3 times during the week, just go run about 5 miles or about 35 or 40 minutes. If you got to rest a couple of days, that's fine. This is realistic. Yeah. Well, she ended up crushing her previous marathon best, right, by 20-some minutes, running close to 3 hours. And despite the fact that she never got over 42 miles a week.
Yeah.
Okay? And then the other person was in the same boat. He was a podiatrist, a medical doctor, especially in podiatry. He was doing surgery. He was super busy. He had his own practice, and he wanted to break 3 hours. Well, he run 3:10. I prescribed similar type of approach. Lo and behold, he runs like 2:38, 2:37 high, 2:37.58.
Yeah.
It's huge. So that was an eye-opener for me. A, you don't have to do nearly the volume that everybody thinks you need to do. And B, the benefits of focus on a couple big workouts a week, particularly if you have a busy life schedule, family, work, whatever, is highly effective.
Yeah,
really.
I think you make a really good point there, especially for the people that have lives outside of running. So those people that are fans of running, they see what the elites do, but they don't realize that the elites, like, that's their full-time job, so they can recover. Whereas if people have family, work, they can't expect to train the same way. So they're better off doing a little bit less, and they'll actually get better results because of just all the other life stresses that they have.
Yeah, and they're also just going to get injured if they try to keep a schedule that's anywhere similar to what an elite that's sponsored. Now, I have most of my elites work.
Yeah,
They do.
Yeah, we'll get to that because like Tim and Elite as a pro squad are quite fascinating. So we'll discuss that shortly. But what are some of the biggest mistakes you see athletes, or in your 30 years or so of coaching, the biggest mistakes that you see athletes generally making with their running?
Number one is trying to match the pros in terms of training volume or intensity. And remember, if somebody is an elite runner and they're running 100 miles per week or 160 kilometers a week, 6 minutes a mile or wherever the equivalent is in kilometers is actually quite comfortable for them, right? Now, my guys actually run considerably slower than that because I require that. But my point is, they cover in a particular hour a lot more distance at their comfortable pace than the average Jane or Joe.
Yeah.
So if you think, oh, well, the local guy who's running, let's use somebody who's not elite, but he's local, who's pretty good, and is a male. Let's say he runs 31 minutes. Well, I'm going to go and do 10-mile runs or 16-kilometer runs too, because that's what he does. Well, you're a 40-minute 10K runner or a 35-minute. It takes you a lot longer to cover that distance than he does.
Yeah.
And you're pounding your body step after step after step much longer than he is.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're looking at hours per week. The slower guy is actually going to be running a lot more than what the elite guy would be because, yeah, as you said, they're running slower. So
well, they're pounding their legs more steps. And so that's why going by time is a really much more effective. Yeah. Really. I want to run at a good level, so I'm going to try to work my way up to an hour per day. And that's fine because that's a good target for the vast majority of people who are working and so on. And maybe a 90-minute run on the weekend. It's 2 or 3 days per week. Maybe they only run 45 minutes or 35 minutes. And they can keep the ball rolling. They can keep momentum going. They don't have major setbacks. They can adapt to the training quite well, given their stressors that you mentioned.
Yeah. And do you have a general rule of thumb when it comes to easy days? Like you mentioned before that you force your pros to go slower. What's a general rule of thumb in terms of maybe like how many minutes slower per mile than your 5K pace? Or do you have anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. My rule of thumb for 30 years has been anything less than 2 minutes per mile slower than your 5K pace is too fast. So if you run 5 minutes a mile on your 5K, you better not run any faster than 7 minutes a mile on your easy day. All you're doing is burning up your stored glycogen, the carbohydrates. And what you're going to end up doing is feeling exhausted or having insufficient power and capacity to perform your quality workouts well.
Yeah. And you mentioned.
And besides that, what happens is your nervous system gets overloaded, thinks it's in a fight or flight stress syndrome type of situation on a constant basis. If you're always doing medium, high, or high intensity, and as a consequence of that, you end up having autonomic system overload. Your adrenal glands on the top of your kidneys are going to kick out too much epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. As a consequence of that, you're going to end up decreasing your capacity to absorb training, and at some point break down, whether it's from poor health or just general malaise that doesn't allow you to have any kind of motivation to train. But if you go slowly, guarantee, if you go slowly on your ease days, you won't overload your autonomic nervous system. You won't have too much hormonal overload. You'll have a high affective component, meaning your attitude, your disposition towards running is enthusiastic on a regular basis. And you look forward to your quality days and races rather than having to psych yourself up to do them.
Yeah. Some good advice there. I'm sure all of our listeners will be having a little giggle because there's 3 of us that co-host the show, and of the 3 of us, I probably run my easy days on the quicker side compared to the other 2. So what you've said there probably applies to me. I should probably slow my easy runs down a little bit.
Yeah.
In terms of you as a coach, how have you evolved over the years? Like, do you look back when you first started coaching and see mistakes that you made, or you've been pretty consistent throughout the 30-odd years?
I think the major change that has occurred to me over the years is focusing more and more on time and less on distance.
Yeah.
as we talked about, it just depends upon how fast you travel. So assigning mileage, I think, is a huge mistake. Now, in a homogeneous group where everybody's the same ability, okay, it probably makes sense that you can go assign 10 miles or 5 miles or whatever, because everybody covers the same distance at the same time, and that's fine. But the problem with it is also as you become fitter or not as fit, then if you're still assigning 5 or 10 miles, you're either running more, too much, or too little. If you were a 38-minute 10K runner and you're out there running 8 miles and that was providing benefit for you, and then a year or two from now you're now running 35 minutes and you're still running 8 miles, well, you're actually covering much less time during that 8-mile run, and you're probably going to plateau. You're just not going to get any benefit. You need to go back and run the exact amount of time you did when you ran 8 miles.
Yeah. You mentioned before, and it was going to be one of my questions, a key phrase amongst Tin Man Elite is keep the ball rolling.
Yes.
What's the meaning behind that?
Oh, well, that started when I was a kid, 9 years old. In where I grew up in cold country, there was a lot of snow in the winter. And I came home from school and I was 9 years old and I went out to my yard because it had snowed a lot. And I wanted to build a snowman. And you have to build 3 balls, a big one on the bottom, a medium-sized one in the middle, and a small one on the top. Loved doing it. And I was rolling the bottom one, and it was very heavy, wet snow, super heavy. And I'm not very strong as a 9-year-old boy. But I'm fine in moving the ball forward. As long as I keep momentum going, I can push this ball that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger in size as I roll it in the snow. It accumulates more. My mom yelled out the window. She rolled up the window and said, "Hey, Tom, come in for dinner. Your dad's going to be home from work soon." And I turned around and said, "Okay, Mom," and I let go of the ball. This huge snowball. I turned around and I thought, oh, well, I'll just roll a couple more times before Dad gets home. Couldn't get it started. Could not get that big ball started. And I was very frustrated with myself because I needed to get a little bit bigger to be able to make this tall snowman. It was my first introduction to the idea of keeping the ball rolling. Once momentum stops, it's very difficult to get it going again. It's not so difficult to move this heavy big ball, this really big ball that's heavy, if you've got momentum, if it's already rolling.
Yeah. That's so well. It relates so well to distance running in that the value of consistency and not stopping, and it's well said.
Yeah, so if you can do 10 quarters in 60 seconds, you're an elite 1,500 meter runner. And that exhausts you, maybe you're better off doing 7 or 8 of them. Yeah.
So do whatever you can do to make sure that you don't get injured, don't get sick, and you just keep consistent.
Keep going.
Yeah.
I always say that the keep the ball rolling philosophy, also, my guys will always hear this too, always frequently hear this from me. It's chipping away, I call it. I said, look, Michelangelo was not only a great painter and painted the Sistine Chapel, but he was a great sculptor. And he would take a big piece of granite with a hammer and chisel, one in each hand, and take a look at this big piece of granite and say, I'm going to make David the thinker. Well, does he take a big old whack on this granite, with his hammer and chisel and knock out a big hunk? Probably not, because he has made that mistake before, and every time he does it, he ruins this granite rock that he worked hard to find. Yeah. He'll take little wax, precise wax, change the angle, chip away. It's the same concept, That's about how we should look. That's how we should look at improving our performance levels.
Yeah.
We should look out and say, "Oh, I'm a 35-minute guy and I want to run 30 minutes next year." That's kind of unrealistic if you've already been training a while. Why not go from 35 minutes to 34:30? When you get 30, try 34 minutes. Chip away, keep the ball rolling.
Some good life lessons in there, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So,
and also from the point of view of our mental sanity, think about the emotional stress of setting absurd goals and every time we go out and do a workout, we're worried about hitting a huge goal, And what we do is we overtrain. We work too hard.
Yeah. Let's move on now to Tinman Elite. So formed in 2017, and it's would you like to explain how Tinman Elite came about?
Well, my first runner was Morgan Pearson, who's a world-class triathlete now. The second runner was Drew Hunter. They basically joined me. They were the first two that summer. What happened was lots and lots of people had asked me, who were pretty good runners, to form a team. And at that time, I had a lot going on in my life, and I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't feasible. And then Morgan came along. He graduated from the University of Colorado, and he said, we should form your nickname is Tin Man. We should form a team. And he mentioned the Tin Man Elite. He's the one that mentioned to me using that title. And I thought, I like that. That's really good. I said, I'm ready to do this. I said to my wife, I'm ready to do this. I finally have got a lot of other stuff done. I was working on finishing up my second master's degree that was in business. I finally got that set aside. I finally had some time. I was finally making enough money I could support. We went through a lot of financial struggles when the stock market crashed, and my wife and I, struggled to pay our bills. So it was a big stressor in our life. But that was now finally passed in 2017. And with Morgan and then Drew very soon thereafter, it was the beginning of something really interesting and exciting. The idea of developing a team. And again, I emphasized that I wanted to create a team. I didn't want to just form some club where people just come and go and it's all about them. They show up when they want to show up. They don't really have any interest in helping somebody else out. Maybe they socialize a little bit, but they're just kind of isolated. I wanted people to form a family. I wanted them to be all in, all the time, help each other out succeed. The idea that individualism is not going to be accepted on the team in terms of I don't care what happens. I want to destroy people in workouts. I don't want that. No, we don't destroy people in workouts. We help each other out all the time. That was the kind of the philosophy. And then the next component to the philosophy was, if we're going to do this, we're going to reach out to the running community in our area, in our nation, and around the world.
Yeah. Because
there's so many people out there that would love to be connected to others. Let's think of it this way. Not that many people as a percentage in this world run, or at least run for a sport.
Yeah.
It's a small percentage. We're in a club of people that we should think about that. We have more in common with the person on another continent that runs and puts on their running shoes and is working towards a running race. They want to run the Berlin Marathon. And here you are in Australia. You're training for the Berlin, and somebody in America is training for the Berlin, and somebody in Canada. And you know what? You have a common bond.
Yeah, well, look, even chatting to you, so I've got more of a common bond with you than I do with my next door neighbour.
I hear you.
Yeah. So from what I understand, you were coaching Drew by correspondence originally. He comes out of high school, signs a 10-year contract with Adidas or Adidas, but they don't have a pro squad in the US. So he's pretty much on his own, being coached by you, correspondence, but then decides to move to Boulder. Is that fair? Right. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. And Drew and I talked about, and his parents too, potential other locations. And so we did visit places like Flagstaff and so on. And he came to the conclusion that, Boulder suited him better. And I continue to emphasize not only that there are a lot of athletes there that run and cycle and cross-country ski and you name it, and endurance, it's an endurance haven. But the beauty of Denver is it's a central hub. It's right dead center in the middle of the United States. It also has an airport where you can fly out of and go to anywhere in the world. Yeah. You can't do that in Flagstaff, Arizona. You just can't. You got to drive 90 minutes down to Phoenix before you can go anywhere. But anyway, Drew made the choice to go to Boulder, but he couldn't move right away. He had to get some ducks in order, so to speak. So he stayed at home in Virginia for the first year of his professional career, and trained on his home turf, so to speak. And in the meantime, worked on the idea of getting in touch with other people who were graduating from the university, who wanted to, form a team and be be coached by me, and that would be a requirement that he made. And what happened was he finally moved to Boulder, and he had one or two people other than Morgan, who was already there being trained by me, join, like Reed Fisher, and then Sam Parsons and Tyler Mueller, and then later on. And at that point, the momentum started. We kept the ball rolling. We started looking out there, and the guys made a big decision. They were going to set some standards as to who could be on the team. Character standards was a big thing for them. They just didn't want anybody on the team who was fast. That wasn't the priority. The priority was people that were compatible with our philosophy, would be somebody they could be friends with on a regular basis, daily basis. That was huge to them because they're going to be living and training on a daily basis together. They don't want people that have no interest in being of high moral character, as an example.
Yeah. And I sort of gather that you're willing to have people that that are willing to show commitment to you guys. Like for Jordan, for example, his story of just reaching out to you and saying, well, if you're serious, jump on the plane and come over here. And, he did that. And I read the other story about, was it Joey, who sort of obviously reached out through social media, he got a hold of me. Joey and Henry got a hold of me, and Kyle Medina got a hold of me. And they said, hey, look, we absolutely love your philosophy. We love what the team is doing. Love to be part of it. We think you're a great coach, and we'd love to have you coach us. But would it be possible to join the team? I said, look, the protocol is simple. You got to fly out here and meet the guys and stay a few days and do some runs with them and go to dinner and play a little backyard basketball together and just get to know each other, and they will decide whether you're a good fit. Yeah. So since you've sort of got the ball rolling now, and it's Tin Man Elite has really taken off over the last, 12 to 18 months, has the financial support from Adidas or other corporations changed in that time? Or because I know you referred before that. We mentioned before that a lot of the athletes are still working full time. So how does the setup now work in terms of the pro squad with, getting them to races and, because obviously Drew was being looked after and is still being looked after, but are the other athletes getting some level of support now? We have a couple of different things going on. One, we have a couple other people that signed smaller contracts with Adidas. So Jordan did, and Sam did. They have smaller contracts, which helps out. And but the vast majority of their money that they need, that they spend on travel and everything, is they make it themselves. Now, having said that, there is some progress being made, largely with the help of sports agent Ray Flynn, who has interacted with Spencer Nell, the man in charge of Adidas World Athletics. And apparently there's a contract in the works that's being signed by legal to help out with in some capacity. Is it a high-level contract where we get a lot of money and the guys can stop working? No. But from Mr. Nell's perspective, let's take it one little step at a time and prove yourself and get better and better before we even think about that. So what we have at this point is you will help out with providing some merchandise that we can, the guys can sell at a low cost, so they got to do all the work. They got to do the promotion and selling it, and they spend a lot of time in their basement,
typing up the labels and sticking them on in the packages and mailing them out. They do a lot of work, and they do all the marketing and promotion work to do that. And then and Mr. Nell has provided some individual incentives where if you perform at a high level, for example, at the national championships or the Olympic Games or World Championships or one of the huge road races, you can earn some extra money, which will help you pay for living expenses. And that's nice of him to do that.
Yeah. There's a real international feel to your team. You've got Jordan, who's the Maltese Australian. Sam's German, is that right?
Yeah, he grew up in the United States. His mom's full-blooded German, and he loves Germany, he loves America, and he decided he would like to join the German team and compete. And so he did. Last year, he was the German national 3,000 meter indoor champion, and outdoors he almost won it. He got second in the 5,000 meters. So he's in a kind of a, just as a segue right now, he's been struggling with bursitis near his Achilles tendon very badly. So he's been seeking treatment the last few weeks and hasn't been able to train at a high level. So he's doing a lot of cross training at the moment till they get this bursitis thing taken care of. But we're hopeful that he'll bounce back and make his German national team again this summer. I think in June they had the qualifying.
So with having a few international athletes on the team, like with the US trying to secure sponsorship, does it hurt having international athletes? And also, what do you think needs to be done to, I guess, take Tin Man Elite to the next level where some of these athletes can actually work less?
Well, to answer your first question, I think it does benefit us to have people from international locations. I think people from other countries can have high moral character, be good teammates. You don't have to be born in America to have good character and good teammates. And also, I think it's very interesting from a team dynamics point of view to have people from other parts of the world or even other parts of the United States, because it adds to your understanding of what people are like and what is possible. And having this narrow vision of what the world is like based on only what you've experienced kind of is not necessarily a good thing in terms of promoting the philosophy of our team.
Yeah. And it also promotes the fact that, I know Jordan through Australia. Now Tin Man Elite is being exposed to Australia by you having an international athlete on your team. I guess I was just wondering whether US companies are less willing to sponsor teams where their money's potentially going to international athletes. That's all. But
I don't think that's the case. I think what matters more is the bottom line.
Yeah. Are
they going to be able to make a profit? Well, yeah, they are. Anybody that's associated with the Tin Man Elite and my future club that will be my other team that will be announced next week, Tin Man Track Club. My belief is really simple. A business person is going to make the decision, will we make a lot of profit by associating with them or not? We've had other sponsors like Camelback that's joined sponsorship for our team recently. It appears that Coral Swatches will be doing that as well. Yeah. We may have some others that might join us because we have a huge media presence. Let's be frank. Anybody that's associating with us is getting media exposure.
Yeah.
And they're going to profit from it big time. And I would say there's a whole nother component. We have a positive vibe on our team. It's super positive, and my club will too. And the beauty of the positive image is presenting a positive image is organizations, the business organizations, entities are going to want to have that affiliation. They want to join with somebody that's got a positive vibe.
Yeah. So that second part about what needs to be done now to get some of these athletes to be able to take a step back from full-time work. You think it's increased the media presence and the popularity of the team. That's going to get the sponsors on board as opposed to outright just performances.
I think it's probably both. I think certainly performing at a even higher level and doing extremely well in world events is going to make it likely that Adidas, as an example, will, in particular Mr. Now, will want to be more inclined to throw some money our way because we're proving ourselves. And I also think anybody in their right mind that wants to increase their business exposure to the market is going to want to align with us because we have a huge following and it's growing all the time. I'm not joking. All the time.
I know. And actually one of my questions here, which we've already touched on, it was getting your thoughts on the direction and perception of the team. So just some notes that I wrote down here was that from an Australian's point of view, it seems like the athletes have taken ownership. By that I mean there's a good presence on social media. They aren't afraid to interact with the fans as well as give us a glimpse of their life. They also come across as very authentic and genuine and want to develop the sport as opposed to just focusing on running fast and their own personal achievements. So we've touched on that, and that's exactly what your team is about. How did that, because we spoke about this off air, that a lot of the top pro teams, you see a little bit of stuff on Instagram, but it always seems quite staged and a little bit fake, and they want to keep things a bit secretive, whereas you seem the opposite of that. You know, you've got some of your athletes on Strava, you're willing to come on the podcast and have a chat. Was that something that you wanted to actively develop, or the athletes wanted to, or the athletes approached you and said, hey, let's do this, let's start up YouTube videos and whatnot?
Well, it started from the basic philosophy, as I said in 2017. We're going to reach out to the running community around the world. That's got to be our mission, and you have to understand a portion of this philosophy that I developed had to do with some lifestyle stress and challenges that occurred for me, and it was hard to, it's a little bit hard to talk about, but I had a brain tumor and I nearly didn't make it. I had to have surgery, and my blood supply was being cut off from my brain because of the tumor. And this was 5 years ago, and I had to have surgery and thankfully I survived. And when I woke up in recovery in the hospital, not knowing whether I was going to make it because I'm in intensive care, I started thinking about what life was all about, what I wanted to do with life now that I was maybe given a second chance, so to speak. And I wanted to help people. Yeah. I wanted to help people. And so when I formed the running club, the running team, I said, let's help people. Let's reach out to the community. Let's make this a priority. Otherwise, I'm just not going to do this. And in much to the credit of the individuals that came onto the team, they loved the philosophy, and it was part of probably what they had been yearning for, to step outside of their isolated little world and make positive connections with people out there. And so they ran with the philosophy. To their credit, they ran with the philosophy. Now, we did get some help. We had a man who I greatly respect named Mike Toomey. He's a very prominent businessman and in the Carolinas on the East Coast, and he helped out my guys quite a bit with developing the early social media components. He got his social media people to help our Tin Man Elite with developing that sort of thing on their website, how to do it wisely, how to do it efficiently, and to their credit, they learned quickly and made it a priority. And yes, to their credit, they're authentic people.
Yeah,
that's who we have on the team. They want to be real, even if they have some downs. They're suffering through an injury, or they have a subpar performance at some race. They're not going to hide from everybody that they don't feel excited. They want to let people know, look, I too have a little bit of depressive attitude after I don't achieve my goal, and it bums me out for a few days. And I think that speaks a lot to their moral character. They care, you know.
Yeah. And do all the pro guys live together? Is there like one or two houses, or they're all sort of spread over the place?
We got there's 3 houses. Drew has a house with people in it, and then there are 2 other houses that are about half a mile away.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything, but there's been so much great advice and really appreciate it. Actually, one more question. What's going to be the difference between the Tin Man Elite and the Tin Man Track Club? How's the Tin Man Track Club going to work?
Well, the Tin Man Track Club will be elite runners that have to be within 3% of the United States Olympic Trials qualifying standard for their particular event. So, for example, the marathon requirement to run in the Olympic trials here is 2 hours and 19 minutes. So if you're roughly off the top of my head 2 hours and 23 minutes in some change, then you are eligible to be on the team, and you don't have to be local. Yeah. For example, Charlie Boyle in your country is somebody I've been coaching for many months. And I just invited him to be part of the Tin Man Track Club because he ran a 2:23 recently.
All right. To go. So I could join Tin Man Track Club then.
You could if you're coached by me. You got to be coached by me.
Yeah.
And you got to beat that time standard. But it's not restricted to Boulder area.
Yeah.
For example, people spread out all over. I have Brogan Austin, who was our national marathon champ. He lives in Des Moines, Iowa. That's about 7-hour drive from here. And I have Alfred Chalenga. He was Kenyan. He lives in Alabama, at least until June. And I have several women that are spread out that are really good. And I have about a dozen on that team already, on that Tin Man Track Club.
So how many people do you coach in total? Because you have online coaching as well. Because your website is runfastcoach.com.
It is. I don't exactly know. I have different levels of coaching where some are easy peasy to coach, where I just write the schedule and they're just mature adults and they follow the schedule and they don't hassle me every week with 16 questions. I have one, her name is Darian Andu. She's a professor. She's about 60 years old and she's a really fast runner. She's down in Florida. And she only emails about once every 6 weeks, says, hey, just let you know, I just set 3 PRs and I'm still getting better when I'm getting older. And I love it. By the way, my schedule needs to be updated in 2 weeks. And then I coach a bunch of high school kids that are superstars in America. They've been coaching 2 or 3 years. I've coached several kids over the last few years that became, in fact, world age group record holders for various distances.
Yeah, I should probably give you a bit of a shout out here because I did do some research, and Aidan Puffer, I think, is the guy that you're referring to, ran an under 14 world record for the 5K in 14:47, which was also a US high school freshman record. So how do you go, or how do you have to treat the 14-year-old who obviously is very early in their career versus a masters versus the elite? So there are different tactics that you use to be able to, I guess, get the best out of all of those runners at different stages of their careers?
Well, that's a good question. So we have a couple different considerations when we coach a younger athlete. One, what is their background in sports? Because somebody's been playing soccer, for example, for several years, has great agility and athleticism most likely, and some pretty decent endurance. And so at 13 years old, if this kid has been playing for 5 years competitive soccer in the clubs, that person is considerably different than a 13-year-old who's never participated in sports. Yeah. So I look at sports age as the number one factor. Then I look at maturation, physical maturation. And girls, for example, as a general rule, are about 2.5 years ahead of boys. I coached Grace Ping to some world record age group world record holders. And at 12 or 13 years of age, she was nearly mature. She was equivalent to at 12 years old, she was equivalent to about a 14.5-year-old or 15-year-old boy, in my opinion. So that's another component. And then you have things like, what is their life situation at home? Are they able to get a high level of quality nutrition? Do they have parents who are a little more affluent and who can make sure that they get high, organic food and make sure that they get good medical treatment? Because that is considerably different than somebody who grows up with less financial resources and can't get sports medicine care when they need it, or physiotherapy, or whatever. So a lot of factors like that. And then I look at performance level. I've always said it's ludicrous to say, oh, well, you're 13 years old, you can't run more than 20 miles per week. Well, wait a minute. One 13-year-old might be in Aiden's case, 14:47 in 5K, and another might be 27 minutes. Their ability to handle training volume is and intensity is considerably different. So performance level, particularly from an aerobic standpoint, is a huge factor in determining what I prescribe for training. I coach Valencia Wright and have coached for 3.5 years or so over in Scotland. She's an outstanding runner. She has dealt with some health issues that are unrelated to running over this last year and had to dial back her training, but she was clearly able to, even 1.5 years or 2 years ago, run an hour per day, every day, no problem. She runs on grass. She doesn't run on pavement. That's another thing, environmental. Are they able to run on soft terrain or not? Because if they're able to run on soft terrain, that's far more forgiving on the body than running on inner city, running on the sidewalks of New York City. Yeah. Big time difference. I
think, the fact that you, factor all those things in, shows what good coaches do. They don't just go, this is the program that worked for this person. You need to factor in, all, the individual circumstances. So, you said that before that you weren't, this is the last question, you're not so much focused on having to run massive miles and that sort of thing. So who's your top marathoner? Is it Reed? Is he?
Well, Brogan would be, because he's actually run the marathon.
Yeah,
Reed has not run one yet. They're both about the same level. They're in my estimation, they're right around 209 fitness level on a flat course right now.
Yeah. And so mileage for a 209 marathoner, where would you cap those athletes off at?
Goes back to what I said. Depends upon if it's in close proximity to the marathon or farther away. So farther away, both of these guys run between 80 and 90 miles a week.
Yeah. Okay.
Closer, they're between 100 and 115.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're just chatting about, how you guys are making the sport popular, and our podcast, we've been trying to promote our top distance runners like your Stewie McSweens, Brett Robertson, because 80% or 90% of the people or the recreational runners, they haven't known who our top runners are. So what do you think can be done to, get the sport into sort of mainstream media and get a bit more support for athletes?
The first question I have is, why are other sports in the mainstream media? The question is rhetorical and the opposite. What it really comes down to is money.
Yeah.
Okay, so those other sports are in the mainstream media or in the mainstream, they're on TV or whatever because they have money involved. Well, it's the simple fact that everybody knows what those top athletes make.
Yeah, yep.
We don't have that at all in track and field. And I've said this for quite a long time. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're making it an amateur sport instead of a professional sport. The public does not perceive track and field, athletics as a professional sports because nobody knows what money is being made.
So you think that if we were putting out there what your Jordan Husseys and Galen Rupps and these types of athletes were getting paid, it would change the perception?
It would, in a heartbeat. And there would be more money involved within a few short months.
Yeah, it's actually a good point because I've been involved with the sport for 20 odd years and, am relatively good friends with the top runners in the country, but I still wouldn't even know what their contracts are worth or how much they're making. Whereas as you said, any of the footy codes here, it's in the paper every week about this person signed for $5 million over 5 years or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting point.
Well, my first understanding of this concept occurred about 3 years ago when I was watching ESPN, which is a major sports
yeah, we get that over here. Yep.
Oh, okay. So I was watching ESPN Classics, and they were interviewing football players and basketball players that were pretty high level, really high level people from the early 1970s. And people like Terry Bradshaw says, well, what really helped me make more money was, and he mentioned somebody else, and I can't remember who. Terry Bradshaw was a famous quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers that won the Super Bowl multiple times, and in the mid-1970s. And he said, if it wasn't for, and he mentioned the name of the individual, I can't recall, I wouldn't have even made nearly as much money as I did. And I thought, what? What is he talking about? He said, well, what happened was in 1971 in pro football, everything changed. What happened was a particular individual who was one of the higher level professional football players mentioned in a press conference what he just signed for his contract. Now, apparently he broke his contract rules. He wasn't supposed to announce it because what the football teams owners are afraid that everybody want more money if they know how much they're paying their top guy.
Yeah. Right.
But he broke it by accident. He broke the rule or code or whatever and he said, I'm making $112,000. Well, the average salary for the NFL player was something like $24,000 at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Within 18 months, the average salary tripled. Same thing happened in the NBA. In fact, NBA players, according to the one they interviewed, right, were working part-time jobs, NBA basketball players, working part-time jobs because they couldn't afford to pay their mortgage.
Yeah. Like, obviously, TV is where all the money is, but do you think sometimes the general public find athletics a bit dull? And do you have any strategies? Or we put an event on. Well, I didn't put an event on, but there was an event here in Australia which it was called Steigen #1. So you had 10 teams. Basically, you had 4 women in each team and 4 men in each team, and it was like an elimination race. I'm not sure if Jordan might have actually mentioned it to you. He was there that night. I was chatting to him. But you had 40 men in a 3K race. The top 20 go through to the mile, which is 10 minutes after the 3K. Then you have 10 go through from the mile to the 800, which is then 10 minutes after the mile. And then you have 5 go through to a 400. And there's obviously a winner at the end of the night, but there's a teams component. So if you finish first in the 3K, you get 40 points because there's 40 guys in the race, and it goes all the way down to 1 point for last. Do you think maybe trying to incorporate a bit more of a teams event within distance running, and you sort of do that with cross country, but it's not the same. Any other strategies that you think we could do to make, I guess, the sport more appealing for TV?
Well, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I have mentioned this also in other podcasts that we need to do more with teams. For example, all these major international race track meets, they need to have relays, not just at the World Championships or Olympic Games, right? And not just sprint relays. You can have the 4x1, the 4x4, 4x8, or a distance medley at every one of these. Now, the beauty of the relay is the person who doesn't understand what a fast time is for a given distance, who's sitting in the audience supporting their granddaughter or grandson or their neighbor, can understand that relay very quickly when when the person next to them says, look, there are 4 people on a team, they carry this object, it's a baton, it's about, foot long, and they carry it around a lap and they hand it off to the next person. And whichever team, 4 gets to the line first wins in the second place. And so they don't know that 3 minutes flat in the 4x400 is a fast time.
Yeah.
And they don't even have to know that. The person that's novice just looks at it and says, oh, that's great, and it's exciting, and they're cheering.
Yeah, and that's why this teams event was really good, because I was down there that night and the times were irrelevant. It wasn't until the race had been run that somebody would say at the end, oh, what did they run that mile in? But it was, everybody was kitted out in a team singlet. And so if you're in the stands watching and you're supporting a particular team, all you know that you want the majority of your team to make it through to the next round or finish high up to score multiple points. Time doesn't mean anything in these races. So
exactly.
Whereas so many over the last few years, anytime athletics has been on TV, it's been 2 rabbits out the front, strung out, and just chasing fast times, which to 95% of the population means nothing.
Well, that's exactly right. I said that 20 plus years ago that rabbiting was ruining our sport.
Yeah.
Because all we did was have a long string of people and it was boring. Nothing changed. They just followed the fastest guy in front. It was just a long train, as opposed to what's exciting is going to your national championship where there is no pacer and you have no idea what's going to transpire.
Yeah, well, actually last night, so it must be pretty much a year since Jordan won the Australian 5,000 metre title, because that was on last night here in Australia.
Right.
And, we knew that Stewie McSwain was likely to win, but they ran through the first kilometre in 3 minutes. But it was that whole, because there's no pacemakers, and Stewie's pretty much at the back of the field till 3 kilometres. I think they went through 3K in 8:30 something, and then he just dropped the hammer and basically ran 60-second laps after that.
And Jordan just followed him and then beat him on the last lap. But nobody knew that was going to happen.
No. That was exciting last year. Yeah.
Certainly the people who are experiencing watching championship events knew that they would very likely go out slow and something would happen midway or something like that. But they didn't know that, what was going to happen with Jordan and McSwain duking it out. And like in our Olympic trials in the United States, I watched some incredible races at the Olympic trials last 4 years ago. And it was like there was guys taking off in the 5,000, just 2 laps into the race. Boom, one guy took off like a rocket and got about a 75-meter lead on everybody. Yeah. And then the top contenders are like, do we go after him? Don't we go after him?
Yeah.
And so the audience had no idea. And when were they going to go after him? Were they going to wait till 4 laps to go? Or were they going to gradually creep up on him? Nobody knew.
Yeah.
It was very exciting.
Yeah. So, cool. All right. Oh, do you want to give so our listeners can get on board with Tin Man Elite? Are there any particular websites or Instagram? What's the best way that people can sort of, I guess, give their support to Tin Man or Tin Man Elite and Tin Man Track Club?
Well, certainly the tinmanelite.com is the first place to go to, because you'll see profiles of all the individuals on the team. You'll see what they're doing. For example, what races are coming up. You'll see all kinds of video clips because they're videoing all the time, whether it's workouts they do or even fun activities they do, that sort of thing. So definitely tinmanelite.com is a good place to start. I think the Instagram is also just Tin Man Elite. So if you type in this little glass, whatever you call the search, looks like what do you call that? I can't think of what you call that. But anyway, if you type in Tin Man Elite for Instagram in the search, you'll find them right away. And then for the Tin Man Track Club, that website will be released next week, and it's tinmantrackclub.com.
Okay. Oh, cool. We'll add those to the show notes that we put out each week, and it'd be good maybe at some point you can maybe put in a good word with Drew, and we can get Tin Man Elite perspective from an athlete's perspective. That would be pretty cool as well.
Sure. I'll be glad to. And be honest with you, I think it would be fun for you and good for your listeners to get a perspective from a variety of people on the Tin Man Elite or the Tin Man Track Club, simply because they have different backgrounds and how they, just because somebody runs 13:20 in the 5K doesn't mean that he's like another person that runs 13:20,
Yeah.
Where they came from, what obstacles they overcame, how they got into the sport, how they view their future. I mean, there's so many nuances that make them real and authentic individuals. And I think that makes it possible for your huge array of people in your audience to relate to.
And even you said before, you've got some of your elite guys working, and then you've got other guys that don't work. So that's a different perspective as well. So, we'd be happy to have as many as we can get on. So if you can put in a good word, that would be appreciated.
Will do, Bradley.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for your time, and all the best with the upcoming season. You'll have Olympic trials and whatnot. So I hope everything goes well for the team.
Thanks a lot. Hey, just a quick shout out this week, this end of this month and the 29th is the United States Olympic Trials held in Atlanta. And I have 6 people competing there, 5 in the Tin Man Track Club and then Reed from the Tin Man Elite. So that'll probably be live on the internet, I'm sure, and certainly in America, might be in your country as well. I think it'll be on NBC or something like that.
Yeah, we'll definitely be tracking it. So on our weekly show, we pretty much go through all sort of running news, whether it be domestically or internationally, and we will be chatting, no doubt, about the Olympic trials because. Just quickly, your thoughts on the whole shoe saga?
I asked the question, when does it stop? We get 3-4%. Oh, we get 5%. Oh, we get our records just going to be demolished after a while, and it will make no sense. And the problem is, if you're a guy who doesn't wear them for whatever reason, because your sponsorship is different, and you get beat out of a spot that you could have got on the Olympic team, and you don't make it because of a shoe difference, and you were really fitter than another guy, I think that's pretty sad.
Yeah. I agree, but it's also good now that they've at least given some parameters about what the shoe needs to be, whereas before there didn't seem to be any parameters. So, yes, the parameters that they're working in now are probably are still going to lead to faster times than what people were running 10 years ago, but at least now all the other companies can work within those parameters, knowing that another company can't just do whatever they want.
Right, exactly. Other sports came to that conclusion and put into place, policies like swimming. The Speedo type suits they had were no longer eligible, and cycling. You certainly have some restrictions and that sort of thing that made it a level playing field.
Yeah. Very good. All right, Tom. Well, thanks again for all your time. I really appreciate it, and take care.
You too.
See you, mate. Bye.